A safe harbor. As I closed the door behind me, the first thing that caught my eye was a sign that read Safe Harbor. My heart, still racing from my hurried escape, slowed slightly. I had found the right place. The second thing I noticed was the warm, comforting scent of cinnamon, nutmeg, and pumpkin spice. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the fragrance transport me to a simpler, happier time. It was as if I'd stepped out of a storm and into a cozy, safe haven. Looking around, I realized I was in a small coffee shop. All the tables were empty, which made sense since it was close to closing time. The only other person in the room was a young woman behind the counter, cleaning up for the night. She looked up, noticing me. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just about to close." She started, but then paused, a concerned expression crossing her face. "Are you okay?" I held up the safe harbor sign and tried to catch my breath. "Is that true?" I managed to ask. She nodded immediately, coming around the counter. "Yes, of course. Come in and have a seat. I'll lock the door." I sat at a table near the back, where I could see the entire room. I could hear her turning the locks behind me, a series of secure clicks that helped me relax just a little bit more. "There, all set," she said, walking back over. "Are you all right? Do you need me to call someone?" I took a deep breath. "I think I'm okay now. I just need a moment." It was then that I noticed how kind her face looked, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. She looked genuinely concerned, and somehow, that made everything feel just a bit better. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Water, maybe," she offered. "Water would be great," I replied, feeling my nerves start to settle. As she walked back to get the water, I realized just how much I'd been through tonight. My attempt to catch the bus home had been interrupted by a group of rowdy guys. They'd been persistent, and when I tried to brush them off, they hadn't taken it well. So I'd done the only thing I could think of, I ran. Finding Safe Harbor had been pure luck. The young woman returned with a glass of water and introduced herself. "I'm Brooke. I'm glad you stopped by. This is what that sign's here for." "I'm Nina." "Thank you for letting me in," I said, feeling my heartbeat finally starting to slow. She gave me a reassuring smile. "No need to thank me. I'm happy to help." Brooke poured herself a glass of water and sat down across from me. "So, what do you do, Nina?" We started talking, and I told her about my job at the small bookstore a few blocks away. She shared that she'd been running this cafe for a couple of years now. "It's a small place, but it's mine," she said proudly. We talked about our favorite books, and she even told me about her morning routine of baking cookies for the cafe every day. "There's something calming about it," she said with a warm smile. "It's like starting the day off with a little bit of peace." The conversation flowed easily, and I felt like I'd known her much longer than just an evening. Eventually, the clock on the wall caught my attention. I knew I had to go, but I was reluctant to leave. As if sensing my hesitation, Brooke offered, "Do you need a ride home?" "It's no trouble at all." I hesitated, touched by her kindness. "Thank you, Brooke. I'd really appreciate that." She smiled, grabbed her keys, and led me out the back door to her car. The cafe had truly been a safe harbor for me tonight, and as I climbed into the passenger seat, I couldn't help but feel a quiet gratitude for the unexpected kindness of a stranger. As we drove into the night, I felt hopeful, not just for the ride home, but for the new friend I'd found. The drive was quiet at first, both of us processing the whirlwind of events that had brought us together. The streets were mostly empty, with only the occasional streetlight illuminating the road. I glanced over at Brooke, who was focused on the road, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you again," I said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't let me in." She gave a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to thank me, Nina. That's why I put up the Safe Harbor sign in the first place. I wanted this place to be a refuge. You never know who might need it." I nodded, touched by her sincerity. It really was that for me tonight. I think sometimes we forget there are people out there who genuinely care. Brooke glanced over, her eyes softening. Well, sometimes, we just need a reminder. We drove a few more blocks before she spoke again. You know, you're welcome to come back any time. The cafe's open most days, and there's always something new on the menu. It doesn't have to be a one-time visit. Her words made me smile. The idea of coming back felt oddly comforting. I'd like that. Maybe next time, I'll be there for the fresh cookies. Brooke laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to fill the car. Consider it a date. Well, nada, you know. I mean, just that you'll know when to expect fresh cookies. 7 a.m. sharp. I laughed too, appreciating the lightness she brought to an otherwise heavy night. She pulled up in front of my apartment building, and we sat there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. So, I said, gathering my things, thank you again, Brooke. For everything. She nodded. Anytime, Nina. And, just remember, if you ever feel unsafe, you know where to find me. Her words stayed with me as I got out of the car. I waved, watching as she drove off, her taillights disappearing into the distance. I didn't know what I expected when I dashed into her cafe tonight, but I certainly hadn't expected to meet someone like her. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about Brooke and the cafe. My day at work was filled with the usual bookkeeping tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to the cozy scent of cinnamon and coffee, and the kindness of the cafe's owner. Before I knew it, I found myself counting down the hours until I could head back. When I arrived the following morning, Brooke greeted me with a surprised smile. Back already? I shrugged, a little sheepish. You mentioned fresh cookies, remember? She laughed and motioned to the counter where a batch of warm cookies was cooling. Help yourself. I kept a few aside just for you. As I reached for a cookie, she started preparing a cup of coffee. Vanilla spice latte, right? That's what you had last night. I nodded, pleasantly surprised she remembered. We settled into an easy rhythm, chatting as if we'd been friends for years. She told me about her plans for the cafe, and I shared a few stories about the bookstore. Over the next few weeks, stopping by Safe Harbor became a regular part of my routine. Some mornings, I'd grab a coffee on my way to work, and some evenings, I'd drop by for a quick chat with Brooke after a long day. Each visit felt like coming home to a little pocket of peace in the city. One evening, after closing, Brooke invited me to sit with her on a bench outside the cafe. The street was quiet, and the stars were just beginning to peek out from behind the city's lights. You know, when I opened this place, I wanted it to be a safe space for others, she said, looking up at the sky. But I didn't realize how much it would become one for me too. I glanced over at her, sensing there was more she wanted to say. She continued, sometimes, you go through life feeling like you're carrying everything alone. But meeting you, it's reminded me that we don't always have to. There are people who are willing to be there for us, too. Her words struck a chord with me. I feel the same way. I was so focused on just getting through each day, but meeting you has made me realize there's more to life than just routine. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us wrapped in our thoughts. It was a quiet, simple moment, yet it felt profound. From that day on, our friendship grew. Brooke became my confidant, and I became hers. We shared our dreams, our fears, and the small joys of everyday life. In each other, we'd found a kindred spirit, someone who understood the value of a safe harbor in the storm of life. And so, the cafe on the corner became more than just a coffee shop for me. It was a place of warmth and friendship, a reminder that even in a big, bustling city, there were pockets of kindness waiting to be found. And with Brooke by my side, I knew that no matter what storms came my way, I would always have a safe harbor.